Despite Oregon's issues this season, ask any Stanford supporter. They were scared of this football game, and rightfully so, and it was a great one. Oregon wins it over Stanford, ruining the college football playoff hopes. Still in the driver's seat, though, in the North Division, 38-36. We bring in Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree. Very gracious to come on, considering the circumstances. But, Nick, thanks so much for joining us. Let's run this thing down because it's a great football game. The last drive, Stanford, after getting down by double digits in the second half, battling back. Can you kind of take us through that final drive and the 2-point play?
Yeah, so it was about a minute left. Stanford was trailing 38-30. They took over about midfield, and they really kind of opened it up. I mean, clock was ticking, so they passed almost exclusively. A lot of situations where they missed easy passes and then kind of made clutch plays. Finally, were able to get the touchdown with about, I believe, 14 seconds left to bring it to 38-36. Unfortunately, on the 2-point conversion, Oregon really brought the pressure, forced Hogan to throw it too early, and the 2-point conversion was missed on an errant pass.
Yeah, Austin Hooper's been kind of the security blanket, and of course Hogan was looking for him on the blitz, and it appeared as though, he was going for his guy to bail him out once again, but just enough coverage there to get a finger on the football from the linebacker. So Stanford, if you look at some of the stats, some of it tells the story of why they didn't come through in this one, but others point to a Stanford advantage in this one. They had the football for 41 minutes, Nick. 3 turnovers. So I always like to know what the turnovers are caused by, because you can have your strip sacks, you can have great defensive plays in the secondary, or you can have unforced turnovers. And that's what it turned out to be with Kevin Hogan twice on snaps.
Yeah, the first one, an interception, trying to hit Christian McCaffrey, kind of bounced off his shoulders. It was a little bit behind him. Just sort of flew up in the air, and the Oregon defender made a great play. But the second half, those 2 fumbles were just completely brutal, unforced, just sort of boneheaded mistakes. I don't know if it was nerves or what happened, but that absolutely affected this game. And a lot of folks want to blame the refs and say, oh, they made some questionable calls, but Stanford had a shot to win it, and they didn't take advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that this Oregon offense, I just mentioned the time of possession, so they didn't have the ball that much, but they took advantage. Vernon Adams, 10 for 12, only an Oregon offense throwing the football 12 times, running the ball well with Royce Freeman, and he has a number of young running backs that we talked about earlier in the week, that sophomores and freshmen that step in for him. So flipping to the Stanford offense, you look at Hogan's numbers. He played relatively well. He made some great plays with his feet. Exceptional stuff there. The 1 touchdown run was pretty remarkable stuff. Christian McCaffrey, workmanlike effort, 33 for 147. But if you look at the yards per carry, Oregon at least contained him and really made him earn the yardage.
Yeah, you got to take your hat off to this Oregon defense. Not many folks were very confident in Oregon's run defense at all. And they stepped up. They forced a lot of Stanford passes that I don't think a lot of folks were expecting, that many passes out of Stanford. So you got to take your hat off to that. It's humorous and a little unfortunate that you can say he only had 147 yards rushing. But, take your hat off. That defense stepped up.
Yeah, it's less than 5 yards per carry, and considering what Stanford's done in offense and considering Oregon's poorest defensive play most of the season, that's an accomplishment. I think it was Kevin Anderson. I saw a quote after the game that he mentioned that, yeah, this is disappointing. It stings. He kept using that word. At the same time, he thought about the situation prior to the season, the goals of the team, having to play Cal next week with the Pac-12 North on the line, possibly, depending on what Oregon does, and saying we still can win the Pac-12 championship, go to the Rose Bowl. And hey, in this college football playoff atmosphere, I like to bring it back to conference championships, and there are still successful teams out there that haven't quite made the college football playoff. That is such a standard and a talk that dominates everything, that this is still an excellent team that has it right in front of them to do some really good things.
You want to talk about what a difference a month or two can make in terms of our expectations. It's pretty impressive. They went from everyone kind of panicking a little bit because they had to replace 9 starters on defense, and oh, can they really compete? Is the offense good enough to carry this team? And then the Northwestern game happened, and everybody was real worried. And then they go on a great run, and all of a sudden everyone's disappointed that went from they went from can we compete to we're now in the playoff hunt to now we're disappointed that we're out of the playoff hunt. It's kind of wild. It's a wild ride the season goes on, but they're absolutely in contention for the Rose Bowl. I don't think a lot of folks predicted that. A lot of folks probably thought the North would come down to Oregon and Stanford, but I don't know if anyone had them in the playoffs this deep or competing for the playoffs for sure. So there's a lot up for line. They've got 2 big rivalry games coming up. This isn't a total disaster, but it is a huge disappointment.
So if Stanford beats Cal, they wrap up the North. If they lose, then it's wide open for Oregon to win the division. Then, of course, the game against Notre Dame is kind of window dressing at this point in regards to the Cardinal camp in terms of bowl rankings and national rankings and so forth. So that's the deal for Stanford right now. Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree joining us to recap a thriller between the Ducks and the Cardinal. This is a game that has dominated this conference over the past 6 meetings. In regards to conference championships. And if Stanford can hold serve, it's once again, despite losing this one, it's going to fall to Oregon and Stanford for like a 7th consecutive season. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate the breakdown.
Of course, anytime.